They say betrayal stings the worst when it comes from blood. I used to think those were just poetic words, something people said when they were trying to dramatize ordinary heartbreak. But no. Those words carry weight. Real weight. The kind that presses down on your chest when you're trying to sleep. The kind that lives under your skin like a ghost you can't evict. My name is Madison Blake, and this is not a story I ever wanted to tell. I kept it buried for years, tucked away in the deepest corner of my heart where the hurt lived. But lately I've realized the truth demands light, even if it trembles under its own shadow. I was 26 when my father, Richard Blake, betrayed me in a way that no daughter should ever have to endure. But to understand that betrayal, you need to know what came before. Because sometimes the people who destroy you are the very ones who taught you how to trust. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, nestled in a 2-story colonial-style house with navy blue shutters and a white porch swing my father hung himself. Every memory I have of my childhood carries his fingerprints. Sunday pancakes, learning to ride a bike, building tree houses, crying over my first heartbreak. He was always there. Always. He was the kind of dad who showed up to every parent-teacher conference in a suit but made sure to sneak me candy under the desk. The kind who sent flowers to my school on my birthday, even when he was traveling for work. He called me Maddie Bird, said my laugh reminded him of summer. And I believed him. God, I believed everything he ever said. My mother, Joanna, left when I was 9. That's the version he gave me. Said she wasn't ready to be a mom. Said she chose freedom over family. And when I asked why she never called or wrote, he simply shook his head and told me not to chase ghosts. So I didn't. I poured all my loyalty into my father. I made him my hero, my constant, my compass. And for a while it felt safe. Real. I became the first in my family to graduate with a degree in clinical psychology. My dad stood in the crowd that day, his eyes glassy, clapping with too much pride. I remember thinking, he sacrificed everything for me. I owe him everything. I didn't know I was walking through life blindfolded. That behind that proud smile, behind all the I love yous and I'm proud of yous, he was hiding something that would tear the floor from underneath me. But it didn't start with a grand reveal. It started quietly, with a knock. A knock on my apartment door on a rainy Thursday in March. I remember the sound. Firm, unfamiliar. I opened it expecting a delivery. Instead, I found a woman standing there, soaked, trembling slightly, clutching an envelope like it was her last thread of sanity. She looked to be in her mid-40s, dark auburn hair tucked into a bun, eyes that matched mine too closely. "Madison?" she asked. I nodded, unsure. "I'm Lena." She hesitated. "I'm your sister." My throat closed. "Sister?" "I think there's been a mistake," I murmured, stepping back. "No," she said, her voice soft but certain. "There's no mistake." She handed me the envelope and walked away before I could ask a single question. Inside was a photo, aged, creased. A picture of a man holding a newborn baby in one arm, a little girl clinging to his leg. That man was my father. That girl wasn't me. And that baby? That was Lena. There was a letter, too. Handwritten. Sloppy, but emotional. I read the first line and felt the ground slip. "I'm sorry I wasn't in your life sooner. But he made sure we never met. He told us you didn't want us." I couldn't breathe. I remember sinking to the floor, rereading the same line a dozen times, hoping I misunderstood, hoping it was some kind of cruel joke. But the photos kept coming, stapled to documents, tucked behind notes. Bank records, property titles, a will. My father had another family. Not before my mom. After. While raising me. While telling me I was his everything. He was living a double life. Married again in secret. A second home an hour away. 2 more daughters. A woman he never told me about. Vacations I was never invited to. Birthdays I was never even aware of. I felt disposable. Like I was the part of his life he kept in the shadows while he played house somewhere else. For weeks I didn't confront him. I was paralyzed by the weight of it all. I played our old voicemails, trying to find lies in his tone. I read every text message, looked for clues. I scrolled through his social media, like a detective looking for crumbs. But he was smart. He had covered his tracks well. Until now. I wasn't ready to talk to him, but silence felt like poison. So I drove. An hour to the house I didn't know existed. It was a quaint ranch-style home in Golden, Colorado, surrounded by pine trees and wind chimes. There were children's bikes on the lawn, wind chimes on the porch, and there he was, sitting on the steps like he didn't just fracture my entire reality. "Maddie," he smiled. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer. I handed him the photo, then the letter, then the birth certificate of a sister I'd never met. His face dropped. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Everything I needed to know was in the way his eyes avoided mine. "You lied to me," I whispered. He opened his mouth, closed it again. "I was protecting you," he finally said. My laugh was hollow. From what? The truth. From disappointment. From pain. From things you didn't need to carry. "I carried you, Dad. I worshipped you. You let me believe my mom abandoned me. You let me think we were in this alone. And the whole time, you had another family. They didn't replace you. They didn't have to. You erased me from your truth." We argued. We cried. I screamed. He begged. But none of it undid the years he stole. None of it made the betrayal sting less. I left that night and didn't speak to him again. Not until 4 years later, when I stood at his funeral and found out he had left me everything, his entire estate, his company shares, his final letter, written only to me. And suddenly I realized he'd had the last laugh. If you had asked me a decade ago who my hero was, I would have said his name without blinking: Richard Blake, my father. He wasn't just a parent to me. He was the blueprint of what strength, charm, and confidence looked like. He had this calm intensity, someone who never raised his voice yet always commanded the room. People respected him. Men envied him. Women admired him. And I worshipped him. Born and raised in Boulder, Colorado, I was the only child of Richard and Joanna Blake. My mom was gentle, artistic, a bit of a free spirit. She used to paint in the sunroom, humming Fleetwood Mac while I napped in a blanket fort beside her. But those days didn't last. She left when I was 9, and Dad's version of the story was that she just wasn't cut out for the responsibility. "She loved you, Madison," he'd say. "She just didn't know how to love herself." And with that, he sealed her absence as a soft tragedy, one we couldn't change. I remember my 10th birthday, after she left. I thought she might come back. I even dressed up, new dress, brushed hair, the works. But when the guests arrived and she didn't, I started to understand what absence truly meant. Dad made up for it. He always tried. Balloons, cakes, giant teddy bears, sleepovers at the planetarium. Anything to keep me smiling. That became our rhythm. I missed Mom in silence, and Dad filled the silence with distractions. We were a team. Or so I thought. As a teenager, I became fiercely independent but always came back to him. We had our rituals: pancake Sundays, Thursday movie nights, and handwritten letters we'd leave for each other whenever one of us traveled. He supported everything I did: piano lessons, debate club, even when I decided to major in clinical psychology instead of something more practical. He never questioned it. Said, "You're meant to help people, Maddie. Just don't forget to help yourself too." He was charismatic and sharp. He ran a real estate development firm and knew how to handle people, charming them, calming them, controlling them. I used to watch him at events, the way he worked a room like it was an extension of his home. I wanted to be like him. Composed, confident, impossible to ignore. I didn't know back then that being impossible to ignore also meant being a master at hiding. There were people in our life I never questioned. Like Uncle Brad, his best friend since college, who'd always bring me weird antique toys from his travels. Or Janet, Dad's assistant, who once took me dress shopping before a banquet. Or even Mr. Fenton, his old law partner, who always had this strange look whenever I brought up my mother. I didn't question why he never dated anyone after Mom. Why our house always had only one toothbrush in the bathroom. Why no woman ever spent the night, at least not when I was around. I thought it was loyalty. A man who loved once and couldn't love again. Turns out, he just loved in different zip codes. My friends used to joke that I had the perfect single dad. Strong, present, successful. He knew how to braid my hair before picture day, helped me install shelves in my college dorm, and even drove 3 hours in a blizzard just to deliver my favorite soup when I caught the flu. That man, that version of him was real. But only partially. I didn't grow up poor, but we weren't wealthy either. Or that's what I was told. College was covered through scholarships and a small trust fund Dad had scraped together. I worked part-time, lived modestly, and thought my dad's company was comfortable, not wildly successful. After his death, I found out the truth. He was worth nearly $14 million. And somehow, he'd managed to hide that from everyone, including his other family. Yes, the one he had with Sandra Collins, his second wife, though there was never any legal marriage certificate filed under that name. Just a shared property, 2 daughters, Lena and Chloe, and a carefully curated life that existed just outside mine. He lived a double life for 17 years. Looking back, I can see signs I missed. The frequent business trips to Denver that didn't match the company calendar. The birthdays he missed with vague excuses about clients. The weekends when he insisted I visit my best friend in Aspen, just to get away for a bit. I thought he was just encouraging my independence. But now I know he was clearing space for another family. When Lena showed up at my door, I didn't want to believe her. She seemed so sincere. A little too calm, like she'd rehearsed what to say. But her eyes matched mine, hazel, flecked with green under sunlight. And her hands trembled when she held out the envelope. She told me she was raised thinking I had rejected them, that our father told them I refused to acknowledge their existence, that I'd chosen a new life and wanted nothing to do with his other mistakes. Mistakes. That word made me sick. And she said it without spite. She said it with heartbreak. After that first confrontation, I pulled away from everyone. I stopped taking calls, even ignored my therapist's emails. I couldn't bear to be touched, questioned, or comforted. Every piece of affection from my childhood felt altered, filtered through a lie I never asked to be part of. Even when I tried to gather information, legal documents, background checks, old letters, I kept hitting emotional landmines. Turns out, Dad had built more than one life. He built systems. He used different names for business transactions, different addresses for registrations, different versions of himself for everyone. But he kept me as the golden thread between them all. To his other family, I was the runaway daughter. To me, they were the strangers who took my father away. None of us had the truth. Only pieces. The betrayal wasn't just in what he did. It was in how long he did it. The decades of pretending. The years of smiling through lies. The fact that he managed to show up at my graduation party one weekend and then host a barbecue with his second family the next. How do you reconcile a man who teaches you integrity with one who lives as a fraud? How do you grieve someone who gave you both your best memories and your worst wound? And yet, here's the part no one expects. I missed him, even after I found out. Even when I hated him. Even when I vowed to cut him off forever. A part of me still longed for the man who showed up when I broke my leg in high school, who helped me name my rescue cat, who called me Maddie Bird like it was a lullaby. Love and betrayal don't cancel each other out. They haunt each other. That's the hardest part. So I buried my father with a knot in my chest. A knot that didn't unravel even after the will was read. He left me everything. His company, his estate, his personal journals, and a video letter. Just for me. That letter would change everything again. But not for the reasons I thought. Not because he apologized. Not because he explained everything, but because he made one final move, one final twist, that proved even in death he still held the upper hand. And somehow, I think he knew I'd eventually listen. The day I watched my father's posthumous video was the day I stopped asking for closure. It was a rainy Thursday. My hands were shaking before I even touched the flash drive. It had been sitting in my desk drawer for 3 weeks, untouched, unopened, too full of potential truth for me to confront. I had buried him. I had mourned him. But I hadn't yet faced him. The video opened with a grainy frame. He sat in the sunroom, the same one where Mom used to paint, the same room I once called the bright place. He was older than I remembered. His hair grayer, his voice slower. "Hey, Matty Bird." The sound of that nickname broke something in me. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. And I don't mean on a golf retreat, I mean really gone. So first, don't cry. Or at least wait until the second half before you let it out." He smiled at his own joke. I didn't. "There's a lot you don't know. A lot I wanted to tell you, but didn't know how. You've always been my compass, Madison. Even when I wasn't worthy of you. And believe me, there were moments I wasn't." I paused the video. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't cry. Couldn't even blink. When I pressed play again, he leaned forward, closer to the camera, closer to me. "I never meant to hurt you. Or lie. But I lived a complicated life. One that began way before you were born and spiraled far beyond my control." He went on to explain the life he lived with Sandra, Lena, and Chloe. He admitted he was in love with both my mother and Sandra at different times, but couldn't let either of them go. So he kept both. Quietly. Strategically. There were moments I tried to leave it all and come clean. But every time I got close, I imagined losing you. And that stopped me. Every time. He called it cowardice. I called it manipulation. And yet, even now, part of me understood. Not accepted, but understood. He ended the video with something that left my stomach hollow. "You're going to find a box in the study. Use the key I left behind the fireplace brick. What's inside, it's for your eyes only. Whatever you choose to do with it, know that it was always meant for you." That box became an obsession. I found it buried beneath old property documents in his study, mahogany, heavy, engraved with his initials. Inside was a sealed envelope, a ledger, 2 USB drives, and a note written in his handwriting. "The truth will either free you or destroy them. Decide who you want to be." I knew who they were. His other family. The ledger contained financial records, hidden accounts, wire transfers, offshore holdings that supported both households. It also revealed something darker. Sandra knew. Not everything, but enough. She knew about me. Knew I was his first daughter. Knew he saw me on weekends. Knew he kept my photos in a safe. And still she played along. Because her daughters had everything to gain. That changed everything for me. Until then, I had hated my father for the betrayal. Now I saw the whole architecture of it. A betrayal supported not by just one person but two. I confronted Lena again. This time, armed with truth. I met her at a quiet diner outside Denver. She wore her hair in a messy braid, no makeup, a trembling hand wrapped around her coffee mug. She looked younger than me but exhausted, like she'd lived twice the years. I didn't attack. I didn't even accuse. I just slid the photocopy of the ledger across the table and watched her face pale. "I didn't know this," she whispered. She said you abandoned us." "And you believed her?" "I was 12, Madison. What else was I supposed to do?" Her voice cracked. She wasn't the enemy. Not really. But the truth sat between us now. Heavy. Icy. And irreversible. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a spiral. I read every journal entry from my father. Hundreds of pages filled with regrets, hopes, confessions. He wrote about my mother, how her spirit terrified him, how he felt too small next to her freedom. He wrote about Sandra, how she was safe, but manipulative. He wrote about me, over and over again, calling me his redemption and his undoing. I couldn't decide if that was beautiful or disturbing. Sometimes, I hated him more after reading those entries. Other times, I just missed him. I started drinking at night. Just 1 glass. Then 2. Then enough that the bottle stayed empty the next morning. My friends noticed. So did my boyfriend, Liam, a teacher with kind eyes and a tragic patience. He tried to help, but I wouldn't let him in. "Don't try to fix me," I snapped once. I'm not, he said gently. I'm just trying to stand next to you while you break. But I didn't want witnesses to my collapse. So I pushed him away too. The turning point came when I received a letter from my father's former lawyer. It stated that the company, Blake Development Group, was in my name now, per the will. But Sandra had filed a quiet legal claim, contesting the inheritance. Her angle? That the second family had been financially and emotionally dependent on Richard for nearly 2 decades. That I, his first child, had known about them and willfully benefited while they were hidden.
It was a lie.
A desperate one, but dangerous. If proven, it could cost me everything: the company, the estate, even his written legacy. It was the final blow. A woman who had played the long game suddenly wanted to erase my existence. But I wasn't going to disappear. Not this time. I hired an attorney. I gathered every document, every journal, every bank record. The USB drive in the box had video recordings, hidden footage of conversations between Sandra and my father. Discussions where she referred to me as his golden girl and questioned how long she'd have to share the throne. I submitted it all. And I didn't just counter her claim. I filed my own against her for defamation, fraud, and attempted estate manipulation. My lawyer was shocked. "You want to go that far?" he asked. "I don't want revenge," I replied. "I want clarity." For once. The case dragged on for months. The press caught wind of it. Heiress war in Boulder, double-life real estate scandal. My face made it to tabloids. Strangers formed opinions about me online. But I didn't back down. For the first time in my life, I stopped letting someone else narrate my truth. I gave Lena and Chloe the option to sit down with me privately. Lena accepted. Chloe did not. When Lena and I met again, we cried. This time not out of anger, but shared mourning. We had both lost a father we thought we knew. We had both been lied to, just differently. And somehow, that created a strange bond. Not a sisterhood. Not yet. But the fragile thread of one. In court, Sandra's lies unraveled quickly. The footage. The documents. The testimonies.
She looked so small on that stand.
Smaller than I'd ever seen her. Like a house of cards finally crumbling under its own weight. She lost the case.
Publicly.
Legally.
Permanently.
And I walked out of that courtroom with more than just a victory. I walked out with my father's entire legacy in my hands. Now, it was up to me what I'd do with it. And that was its own storm brewing. I always thought closure would feel like standing at the top of a mountain, wind on my face, the weight finally lifted. But when I walked out of that courtroom, truth in one hand and justice in the other, all I felt was stillness. Not peace. Not triumph. Just a silence, so deep it echoed. The storm had passed, yes, but now I had to rebuild. And rebuilding meant deciding what to do with Blake Development Group, the company my father spent 35 years building, and the same company he had used to fund 2 lives, 2 lies, 2 families. For weeks, I couldn't even step inside the building. I'd drive past it every morning, heart racing, palms sweaty. I'd watch the employees walking in, faces I'd seen since childhood, now unsure of how to see me. Was I the rightful heir? The deceived daughter? Or just another rich girl who got lucky in a courtroom? It was Liam who finally dragged me inside. He parked outside the building one Friday morning and turned off the engine.
"Get out," he said.
"I'm not ready," I replied. He leaned in, looking me dead in the eyes. "Madison, if your father had the last laugh, it's because he gave you the punchline. You think that video, that box, those journals, those were confessions?
No.
They were tools. He wanted you to do something with them." I didn't argue. I just opened the door and walked in. The boardroom smelled like lemon polish and stale ambition. 12 executives sat around the long oak table, men and women I'd seen at galas, fundraisers, Christmas parties. My father's closest advisors. I stood at the head of the table, wearing the same navy blazer I wore to his funeral. It still smelled faintly of rain. "I'm not here to apologize," I began. "And I'm not here to pretend I know this business like he did. I don't. But I know people. I know what truth looks like, and I know what deception costs." Some of them shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned in. I'm going to restructure this company, I continued. Not just its board, but its mission. We're not going to be a shadow legacy anymore. We're going to be transparent, ethical, and most of all, accountable. No more secret families. No more hidden accounts. No more lies in mahogany boxes. One executive, a gruff man named Thomas Hale, spoke up. Your father ran this place like a fortress. What makes you think kindness and transparency will keep it from burning down? I looked him square in the eye. Because fortresses keep enemies out. But they also keep healing out. And this company doesn't need a wall. It needs a window. Silence. Then slowly nods. One by one. I didn't know everything about development. But I knew about building from rubble. The first thing I did was create a new division, the Blake Foundation, a nonprofit focused on housing and resources for single mothers and children in unstable households. A quiet nod to my mother. A silent redemption for what my father never fixed. Next, I offered Lena a job. Not charity. Not pity. She had a business degree and a brain sharper than most board members. She started as a consultant. Within 6 months, she was my right hand. It was messy at first. We fought.
Cried.
Laughed awkwardly over morning coffee. But there was healing in the mess. Not the kind that fixes everything. The kind that simply continues. It was almost a year later when I received the last letter. It was handwritten. No return address.
Just my name.
Inside was a single page. Dear Maddie Bird, if you're reading this, it means you finally opened every box and stepped into every shadow. Good. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I didn't raise you with honesty, but I tried to raise you with love. Maybe I failed at both. But if there's one thing I did right, it's that I gave you the keys to destroy or rebuild. And you chose to rebuild. That's what makes you better than me. You were never my undoing. You were always my legacy. Dad. I read it 10 times. And for the first time in 3 years, I cried without rage. Only grief. Only grace. Liam came back. Or maybe I let him in again. We didn't talk about the past much. Sometimes it floated between us in the quiet moments. But he held my hand at board meetings, waited outside courtroom hearings, built me bookshelves in the new apartment I finally moved into, far from the estate, far from the ghosts. He didn't try to be my savior, just stayed long enough for me to save myself. A year later, I gave a speech at a charity gala hosted by the Blake Foundation. The theme was rebuilding with purpose. I wore red that night, a color my mother always said made me look brave. Standing at the podium, I looked out into the sea of strangers, allies, and old memories.
And I spoke.
I used to believe betrayal was the end of a story. But what I've learned is that sometimes betrayal is just the spark. The moment the fire begins, not to destroy you, but to forge something new. I paused, took a breath. My father betrayed me, but years later, he gave me everything I needed to write a different ending. Applause.
Lights.
A moment of release. I still visit the sunroom sometimes. The one where he filmed the video. It's empty now, but I've turned it into an art space, something my mother would have loved. I sit there with a journal and pen, sometimes writing letters I'll never send, sometimes just listening to the quiet. And every now and then, I whisper into the light, Dad, I didn't forgive you to free you. I forgave you to free myself. Sometimes people ask me how I managed to survive it all. The betrayal, the secrets, the unbearable silence of a childhood built on lies. And I tell them the truth. You don't survive betrayal. You become someone new because of it. You learn to carry scars with elegance. You learn that the sharpest cuts often create the deepest clarity. And more than anything, you learn that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's power. I forgave my father not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. He made choices that shattered everything I believed in about love, family, truth. He lied to my mother, lied to Lena, lied to me. But in his final months, he also told the truth. In a way only a man nearing death could.
Raw.
Unfiltered. Almost poetic. He knew he couldn't fix the past, so he handed me the tools to fix the future. And though he never saw what I built, I think he always hoped I would. You might be carrying betrayal in your heart right now. Maybe it was a parent who let you down, a partner who lied, a friend who vanished when you needed them most. And maybe you've been holding on to that hurt like a lifeline because letting go feels like saying, it didn't matter. But I want to tell you something no one told me. Letting go doesn't mean it didn't matter. It means you're no longer letting it define you. You're no longer standing in the rubble. You're building something from it. I spent years waiting for closure. But closure isn't a letter, or a courtroom win, or even a final hug goodbye. Closure is waking up one day and realizing you no longer need the apology. Because you've become the version of yourself that betrayal tried to break. And you're still standing. Stronger.
Softer.
Wiser. The truth is, my father did get the last laugh. Not because he fooled us. Not because he hid things so well. But because he knew, deep down, that one day, the truth would rise. And he believed in the daughter, who would carry it. Maybe that was his redemption. Or maybe that was his final gift. So now, I want to leave you with something. A question. A reflection. Something that might unlock a door within your own heart. What if the betrayal you experienced wasn't the end of your story, but the beginning of your awakening? What if your pain is the soil for something sacred? What if your heartbreak is the exact place where your power begins? Don't let the people who hurt you write your ending.
Pick up the pen.
Rewrite the script. Cry if you need to.
Scream.
Shatter. Fall apart. But then rebuild.
Piece by piece.
Truth by truth. Grace by grace. I named the new wing of the foundation after my mom. The Sarah Blake Sanctuary. It's a space for women and children seeking shelter after betrayal, abandonment, or emotional trauma. Every wall holds stories of healing. Every hallway echoes with the laughter of children who will never know the pain I did. And every brick is a silent promise. That betrayal doesn't win. That truth, no matter how late, can still set us free. If you're still waiting for justice, for apology, for the one moment that makes everything okay, I see you. But I want to remind you, you are already the miracle. You are the story continuing long after the storm. You are the ending that betrayal never saw coming. And like me, you might just realize that the person who thought they broke you gave you everything you needed to rise. So tonight, when you close your eyes, I want you to remember this. You don't need all the answers. You don't need them to say sorry. You don't even need to understand why. You just need to choose healing. Choose softness in a world that made you hard. Choose hope in a story that tried to end in pain. Choose you. It's freedom. It's joy. It's the quiet laughter of someone who lived through hell and still dares to dream again. And maybe, just maybe, that's what my father meant when he smiled in that final video and said, "You'll understand someday." He wasn't mocking me. He was telling me, one day you'll laugh too. And it won't be because you got even. It'll be because you finally got free.